like, well, if first grade is the start of compulsory education, why can't kindergarten be? Because it would show a true commitment, investment in early childhood education. And so I think that's essential, because I've seen the consequences just in my classroom when kids miss significant time.
It's Taj of the
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, to another episode of All the Above, the show that gives you an unstandardized take on education. I'm Jeffrey Garrett, one of your co-hosts, and I've been a middle and high school principal and a high school social studies teacher. And as always, I'm joined by...
What up, family? It's Manuel, your favorite teacher's favorite teacher. I'm a high school history teacher here in the Los Angeles area. And this, of course, is All the Above, your home for news and analysis of all matters pertaining to our world of education. Shout out to those of you who are watching us on YouTube. Now, we're not super active on the YouTubes, so if you only watch us on YouTube, do make sure to head over to your favorite podcast streaming app, because we do drop episodes in between these video episodes that we call passing periods. And if you are listening to the podcast on your favorite podcast streaming app, please go ahead and click that link to go over to the video on YouTube and just give it a quick thumbs up, even if you don't watch the YouTube, just to help out those algorithms. We're trying to build this show, Jeff. We're trying to get this show in more people's feeds, because there's a lot of educators out there fighting the good fight, doing what they can. And a lot of them are working in isolation. And we want to welcome them into the AOTA family. Ain't that right, Jeff?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And, you know, as you were saying that, Manuel, I heard the echoes of Bomani Jones in my ears. It's just saying, if you give less than 5 stars, I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. I mean. And so yes, also helping the algorithms means show some love, and you know, maybe in the great kindergarten wisdom of the world, if you don't have something nice to say, maybe just keep it to yourself.
There is that. Man, picture this world if we all adhered to that very fundamental principle. Wow, the world would be a lot quieter. Let's say that. It'd be a lot quieter. So there's that. Well, Jeff, this is one of those rare episodes. You know, we're 2 full-time educators, and our work life is very busy. So sometimes we film these episodes a little bit ahead of time to give me time to edit it and chop it up, to put it up there on the YouTubes and all that. So this is one of those rare episodes where we're filming on essentially the eve of a very major election. And by the time this airs, the election will already be in our rearview mirror. So, Jeff, it's possible that by the time folks are listening to or watching this episode, all of our problems maybe have been solved. Perhaps we elected a slew of leaders who care deeply about education and education issues. And perhaps we are marching towards a very just and equitable education system for all. So the problems might have already been solved by the time this airs, Jeff.
Yes, folks, we are announcing this is the final episode of All the Above.
Solved
because that's right. Hashtag solved it. Yeah, we're going to be here for a minute, I think, regardless of what happens on November 8th this year.
Yeah.
Although, let's be real, we could go down the completely, like nutty, loony, insane route on November 8th, which I'm certain would have all kinds of unfortunate consequences for our profession of education.
That is
so
true.
Folks, make good choices on November 8th, please.
Yeah, too late for that by the time this airs. But it's possible if we do go down that path, perhaps this episode has already been scrubbed from the internets for being anti-American and CRT stuff and all that. So we shall see what the future holds, Jeff. But assuming that we are out there in the space delivering news and analysis in the world of education, let's go ahead and let our viewers and listeners know what's on today's agenda.
Yes, indeed, folks. Well, as usual, we got a good one for everybody. And today, I think it's fair to say we're going to delve into a topic that takes both Manuel and I a little bit out of our comfort zone. We are both, of course, secondary folks, both high school history teachers currently and formerly. And so that's kind of our wheelhouse, right? And we have had over the years several elementary educators on the show, but I think it's probably fair to say maybe not enough, right? We tend to come from that secondary lens, or even sometimes a post-secondary lens. But today, Manuel, we're going to dive into the world of the early grades, that early childhood education, pre-K, kindergarten, early elementary phase of human development and of our very important field of education, especially when it comes to the developmental experience of the youngest people in our society, Manuel. So today we have a fabulous kindergarten teacher, Tayo Enna, coming on to join us. He works up in the San Jose area. He is an award-winning teacher, a person who's not only done great work in the classroom, but extended that work around the schoolhouse and into the community as well. And we're going to be delving into some really important questions around kind of equity issues in early ed. And so I think it's going to be fascinating. Definitely stick around, folks. You don't want to miss it.
Hey, that sounds dope. Mr. Enna in the building. But Jeff, kindergarten, as much as we love the little ones, they're so cute. Some of our listeners, maybe many, maybe most of our listeners and viewers, they don't really work with children at that age, at that level. I know myself as a high school teacher, why should I want to listen to a conversation about what's happening in the world of kindergarten?
Well, first of all, Manuel, I will say that probably, not even probably, 100%. The most underrated, underrespected set of teachers in our profession, Manuel, are kindergarten teachers. Boom. I have never been more terrified in my life to cover a class than I was covering kindergarten, okay? Manuel, like, kindergarten is no joke. Give me some ornery 17-year-olds any day of the week over kindergarten. So first of all, put some respect on their name, all right?
Yeah.
Second of all, I will say that few and far between is the secondary educator or upper elementary educator or parent who's frustrated with their experience in school in some way out there who has not thought about, like, how did some problem that we are seeing in the later grades come to pass, right? How do we wind up with a ninth grader who's struggling to read? Or how do we wind up with, a seventh grader who's got these, like, temper tantrum kinds of, behavior outbursts that seem developmentally like they should be past that stage or something, right? And so I think for all of us, the idea of what a really strong foundational start in the early grades, in particular in kindergarten, what that means for a student's ability to thrive as they proceed throughout their, K-12 educational experience or pre-K-12 educational experience, is a really profound question. And we can all relate to the fact of, like, when that strong foundation is there, it has long-term sustainable ripple effects, right? So whether you are, an early ed teacher or not, everybody recognizes the difference between building on a strong foundation or, having to backfill in those ways. So I think there's huge implications here for everyone interested in good outcomes at the end of our K-12 experience.
Boom. There you have it. There you have it, folks. So definitely you don't want to miss that seminar discussion with Tayo Enna. But up first, we have our Do Now, where we take a look at news and headlines in the world of education. That's up next. Stay tuned. All right, folks, now it's time for today's Do Now. There's a lot going on in the world of education, and the Do Now gives us an opportunity to take a look at least a couple stories happening in our world. So, Jeff, how are we going to do the Do Now today?
Well, Manuel, today we got a roll call. We're going to take some attendance, see who's in the building, who's in the house today.
That ever important roll call. Got to make sure we know who's in the building. And for this first roll call, Jeff, it's actually a lot of names. It's like 120 something names. And we would be here for the whole rest of the episode if we were to actually take attendance and read through this whole roster. So I'm going to just say it's a whole lot of names, Jeff. It's a whole lot of names.
A whole lot of names. Nice. I'm sure that this approach to taking attendance will result in you getting a call from the main office sometime around the end of second period, wondering where your official attendance roster is for the day, Manuel. But okay, if this is what we got to do, this is what we got to do.
Yeah, for sure. This roster is a couple of pages long. With student names, might I add, actual student names. All right. So this is in reference to a story that we picked up from the Hechinger Report, thanks to some good reporting by Neil Morton for the Hechinger Report. And Neil Morton reports that an innovative teaching model has taken hold at Westwood High School in Mesa, which is Arizona's largest school system. Picture 135 ninth graders, 4 teachers, and 1 giant classroom. 5 years ago, faced with high teacher turnover and declining student enrollment, Westwood's leaders decided to try something different. Working with professors at Arizona State University's Teachers College, they piloted a classroom model known as team teaching. It allows teachers to voluntarily dissolve the walls that separate their classes across physical or grade divides. The teachers share large groups of students, sometimes 100 or more, and rotate between big group instruction, one-on-one interventions, small study groups, or whatever the teachers as a team agree is a priority for that day. Each morning, the Westwood teams meet for 2 hours to hash out a personalized program for every student on their shared roster, dictating the lessons, skills, and assignments the team will focus on that day. By giving teachers more opportunity to collaborate and greater control over how and what they teach, Mesa's administrators hoped to fill staffing gaps and boost teacher morale and retention. And it just might be working. In a survey of hundreds of the district's teachers last year, researchers found that those who worked on teams reported greater satisfaction with their job. Also, they reported more frequent collaborations with colleagues and more positive interactions with students. Now, data on the impact on teacher vacancies, however, remains limited. So, Jeff, giant classroom, like physically, literally a giant classroom with a whole lot of students in it, 100, 120, 135, and 4 teachers all learning together. What are your thoughts about this story and this approach to teaching and this approach to addressing the teaching shortage?
Yeah, Manuel. So on the one hand, I generally am down with people thinking flexibly and creatively about how to approach our work of educating young people. And I am usually a fan of opportunities that involve pushing the boundaries around things like what is the physical construction of what school should look like. I am almost 100% of the time a fan of any approach that's going to involve greater collaboration between teachers and deprivatization of practice among educators. And for us thinking flexibly about placement of students throughout the day. So, oftentimes in schools, we just have physical boundaries, walls and things that make that very difficult to do. So, in spirit, I'm curious. In reality, Manuel, I have so many questions. And maybe, the reality is like this article wasn't written to like technically explain all the details of the model. But I was like, I have so many questions, Manuel. So, first of all, I'm wondering about things like what is the actual use of time configuration for this 135 students? Are they in this space all day? Are they rotating between teachers, or are the teachers actually team teaching? Didn't seem to get clarity on that from the model. There are questions that come up about things like credentialing and, are the kids in this model being taught a core content subject by someone who's not credentialed or not an expert in that content area? Because the article seems to be talking about how, this strategy was partially thought of to address issues of teacher shortages. So I'm like, does this mean like they don't have a math teacher, but they're just doing math, on like Khan Academy or something and being supervised by another teacher? The article definitely delved a little bit into the idea of student outcomes. And I think it sounds like, at least in the case of this district in Arizona and maybe some other places in Arizona where this seems to have spread some, that it's maybe too early to tell. But I have huge questions about like, this might be cool and innovative and stuff, but like, what's the result? What's the learning outcome? for the students in this situation. And that might tell us a lot about its effectiveness. So those are just a few of my questions, Manuel. But I finished this article and was like, first of all, I hadn't heard about this approach before, at least not in traditional schools, right? There's like the open school model of the past, and there's certain charters I know that have like sort of giant open spaces, but they still effectively, from what I've seen, have kids in their own class, just in a big old warehouse or whatever, right? And so I don't know. I left with way more questions than answers, and like maybe because of that, a little skepticism. But I am like, I don't know, man. I want to know some of the nitty gritty details before I decide, like, is this a good look or is this just convenient for the school because what we have is a teacher shortage and this is the only way we can cope through it.
Yeah, that's fair. This sounds like an absolute nightmare to me. It just sounds like a nightmare. And I'm just speaking for myself as a high school teacher. When I first saw the headline and got a couple lines into the story, I was just assuming this must be high school seniors or something. Maybe they're working on their final portfolios, graduation portfolios or something like that. And maybe that would be a space where this type of model would make some sense. And then I got to the line that said 135 ninth graders. Man, shout out to all of y'all who teach freshmen. And those of y'all who teach middle schoolers, because, same thing. 135 in the same physical space, it just sounds like a nightmare to me. And I just want to say, first and foremost, I wanted to see what the teachers were saying about this experience. And according to them, the teachers who are in that room, in that space doing this, they had nothing but positive things to say about it. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that the way it works out, although the article certainly doesn't point out a lot of the logistical concerns and nitty gritty details that you asked about, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that, these are educators who are experiencing it and they are enjoying it. And Johns Hopkins University, it's their research team who looked into data from these spaces, these teachers' experiences versus other teachers in the district who teach in the more traditional sense. And these teachers in these spaces had more positive things to say about their work experience and their interactions with students and all that. So this is something that sounds like a nightmare to me, but I'm speaking from the outside, having not seen this with my own eyes or experienced it myself. If the teachers say it's all good, there's, obviously I want to hear from the students. I picture myself as a ninth grader in a space with 135 people. That sounds like fun to me. Like me and all the homies all together. And like that, I assume the students like it too. But yeah, it's very surprising to me. The photo in the article, shows like one teacher, the English teacher, I think like had a microphone in one corner trying to teach. I shouldn't say trying to, addressing one group of students. And then there's another teacher in the back working with students who were collaborating in groups. And it just looked chaotic to me. It just looked like a nightmare. But again, they say it's all good. And I absolutely am here for innovative approaches to teaching and learning for sure. A lot of times folks think like, these sort of innovative things can only happen in charter schools or independent schools. And, traditional public schools are so bogged down by bureaucracy, you don't get any innovation there. And that's just false. Like I've been teaching for 19 years now, and I've seen plenty of innovation in different ways in different spaces in traditional public schools. So I'm all for the innovation. And if this works out in the sense that teachers feel better, if the students are learning, even just if they're learning as much, but especially if they're learning even more than the traditional setting, fine, roll with it. Keep me out of it, but roll with it. And then I think, well, the teachers who are in there, they must be, a self-selected group, right? So like maybe it works well for them, but it does, maybe it wouldn't work well for me or for other teachers as well. So I assume that's a really big, important piece of the puzzle is who are the actual teachers working in a team? Because I doubt this could just apply to any set of teachers.
Yeah. I think those are really smart observations about this story, Manuel. And I have similar thoughts and wonderings myself. It was also unclear to me, and maybe to me, I went, as I read the article, immediately into the technical questions, right? Like, oh, how do they manage this? What does it look like when this happens? And so maybe that's just the bias I bring to the table.
That's the administrator in you.
Exactly, man. But I'm thinking even that the teacher in me is thinking about things like noise, right? And a lot of times in school, when good learning is happening, it's noisy, right? Like kids are
it's noisy
talking
and it
to
looks
one
chaotic,
another, debating ideas. You know what I mean? Like when something juicy comes up in class and a kid says something controversial and the other kids are like, nah, man, that can't be right. Like you're not paying attention to this. You know, like the noise is there's different types of noise in school, right? But you know when the noise is the noise of engagement, the noise of excitement, the noise of humor and joy in the learning process. And so what happens if like one corner of the room is experiencing that and the other corner of the room is needing like time to read and go deep into a text or to write or take a quiz or, you know what I mean? Like, it just sounds like a nightmare, frankly, from a noise management standpoint. And so maybe this is one element of like the teachers collaborate to think about like, what are your needs today and at what time in the day and how do we make it work? I will say, Manuel, to going a little further on your point of what do the teachers think about it, and if they like it, then that's probably a strong indicator. I agree. There were some really interesting points in the article about a teacher in particular talking about feeling the isolation of our profession and that having pushed him out of the profession. And then when he came back, only applying to schools that were using this model because it supported the ability to collaborate throughout the day with your colleagues and not be like alone in a classroom by yourself, and the ability to see other teachers teaching and learn things from their craft and stuff. So to me, it still seems like it would be really hard to do, and I might not like it myself, but I was like, if that's this guy's experience, that could be, one really important reason why this model may have some benefits.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I can't help but picture myself in a space like that. And I'm thinking about, who would teach what. And it kind of sounds like it might be a positive experience. Like, if I'm in there, I'm teaching history and ethnic studies, and my favorite math teacher, Mr. Perek, he's in there teaching math, and we got Miss Dow over there teaching English, and maybe Miss Beverly teaching engineering and science. And I'm thinking about me with those folks in the same room with the same set of kids. And that does sound really exciting. That would sound very promising to me and very, very enriching and fulfilling for myself as a professional, for sure. But damn, man, 135 ninth graders in one space, man.
It's a lot of energy.
That's a lot of hot Cheeto energy, man.
That's a lot of hot Cheetos and Takis coming in at 8 a.m., dude.
Man, for real. So there's that. All right. So for that roll call, a lot of names of 4-page list of names for the attendance there. Who do we have next on today's roll call?
All right, man. Well, next up is, I'm just going to keep it real. This person's whack, and everybody knows it. And so we just going to call him out right now. We got Glenn Youngkin. Manuel.
Glenn Youngkin. Okay. I believe that's Virginia. I believe that's the governor who bravely and patriotically called out this critical race theory stuff in our schools. Yes. And if I am to believe what has been presented, I think he pretty much went out there and laid down the hammer on these Marxist left-wing teachers and extinguished critical race theory from Virginia public schools. Something like that.
Wokeness is now gone from the Commonwealth, I think is the phrasing you were looking for.
There we go.
So we are talking about the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, the racist, twisted, sick, vile governor of Virginia. And I those are mean words in some ways, but sometimes when you're honest, it's just keeping it real, right? This dude's whack. He ran a racist, divisive campaign on the idea of sort of, getting rid of CRT from school, and he won. Racist white folks in Virginia voted for him. So now we have him in office, and the sort of Tipline that he started, Manuel, to collect submissions from the public to turn in your teachers when they're teaching divisive liberal CRT topics. We got a story telling us what's happening with that tip line, and it's just so wonderfully fitting. So let's get into this story, Manuel. This story comes to us from some good work from Alia Wong, Nirvi Shah, and Nick Penzenstadler. I really hope I said all those names correctly. I probably didn't, but shout out to them. Writing in USA Today. And complaints about special education violations, praise for teachers, concerns about academic rigor and options. These are some of the main themes in a sampling of the emails sent to a so-called tip line set up by Governor Glenn Youngkin earlier this year. The email tip line was part of a larger campaign by the governor to root out the teaching of critical race theory. The records became public this week through a settlement between the governor's office and 13 media organizations. Now, despite hundreds of records in the selection of emails, they comprise a small, vocal group of people at about 36 email addresses who often reiterated their grievances in multiple missives. Just a handful of the emails dealt with the issue relating to curriculum. One parent was infuriated that they had to submit public records requests to get copies of the lesson plans and learning objectives for their child's 7th grade English, history, and biology classes. Quote, as a parent, I have the right to validate through the lesson plans that my child is not, in all caps, being taught divisive concepts or in biology not being taught divisive gender-bending LGBT campaigns with overly sexualized lesson content, end quote. That's a poster right there. Okay,
It's a lot.
This parent wrote that in an email, actual text. Groups representing teachers, counselors, parents, superintendents, and others in Virginia's education system wrote to Youngkin asking him to shut down the tip line. Quote, the tip line that Governor Youngkin established for parents and citizens to report teachers, principals, or instruction materials directly to the governor's office based on a subjective definition of divisive has already proven to be divisive itself, the group said in a joint statement. The tip line will impede parent-to-school collaboration and directly undermine the very factors that educators know contribute to student success, including having high-quality teachers in the classrooms, end quote. So Manuel, thankfully, due to the heroic, as you said, patriotic actions of Governor Glenn Youngkin, wokeness has been banished from the state of Virginia, and the children are now free. What the heck do you have to say about this ridiculous story, man?
They are free. Yeah, well, it looks like the witch hunt produced no witches. For a litany of reasons. One, of course, is that this CRT business that was used during the campaign was just a red herring. And aside from the fact that, yeah, technically, the graduate school framework of critical race theory isn't directly utilized and taught to kids. But of course, we know that tenets of critical race theory, very importantly, are utilized in curriculum that is interrogating the legacy of race and racism in America. But yeah, that's clear that, for one, this was just something to rile up the base and report these Marxist teachers and you know, let's get rid of them. But many families across the Commonwealth of Virginia are very much in favor of their young students, of teachers helping their young students interrogate race and racism, and also have curriculum that is, of course, reflective of the diversity of our nation and all of those things. So a lot of folks weren't going to use that tip line in the first place because, despite what we see in online and despite what we see in cable news and all that, it's not just like a majority of folks who like are out there wanting to get rid of this stuff. Like most folks, our school system is primarily students of color now in terms of the numerical majority. So we're talking about families across the nation who want their kids to see themselves in the curriculum. So yeah, they weren't going to be calling this hotline, this tip line. I do love that this tip line was used to report potential violations of special education laws and policies and procedures. That's fantastic. I think that's a fantastic way to kind of flip this red herring business on its face and use the tools at hand to report legitimate violations elsewhere in the system, because we know our special education students are so commonly underserved, and we know too many folks in the system just allow inequities within special education just to persist and continue. So I love that person who's profiled in the story as like flagging a whole bunch of special ed violations. And I also love that, this is a second full episode in a row where we've had a headline about positive direction in this ongoing so-called battle around CRT, because of course we reported about Cal State Fullerton holding a local district accountable for banning CRT, and that university pulled its student teachers. And here we see a tip line that was out there that ended up being a massive failure. Sometimes it just feels so overwhelming as we saw these laws sweep the nation and continue to sweep the nation. These attacks on our curriculum, these attacks on our families and our communities sweep the nation. And it's so great to see evidence that it's not all bad, evidence that actually a lot of these things that are put out there and that seem are going to just totally disrupt and take apart what we do in the classroom are failing. And some important folks out there like Cal State Fullerton are holding districts accountable for what they're doing. And it's just important to see glimpses of and examples of the right things being done so that it's not all doom and gloom. So this is poetic. It's poetry,
Yeah.
Jeff. It's poetry.
It is. I will agree with that, Manuel. With one potential caveat that I will
Sure.
say. So in the details of the story, basically USA Today and a bunch of other media organizations had sued the governor to release the emails because the tip line that was set up, those emails are going directly to the governor. Now, some of them were also somehow transmitted to the State Department of Ed. So media organizations were able to get access to those emails because of Freedom of Information Act requests. The governor is still, maintaining that these emails fall under the category of sort of protected correspondence with the governor. So the vast majority of what's been submitted to this tip line, we still haven't seen, and the governor is holding on to, right? So there is a question, Manuel, of like, well, what kind of stuff is in there, and what is he and his draconian fascist, state authorities, what are they doing with that information? So I'm glad that that in this case, the media is playing its role as a watchdog and putting pressure on a obviously authoritative move by the government and pushing back. I think that's the role of the media in a supposedly free and democratic society, and I'm glad this is at least one step in that direction. But I do think, Manuel, there still remains great danger in this kind of policy being on the books for all the reasons we've said, right? So I am glad the folks are flooding it with other kinds of messages. I welcome all the kooks and loons in the state of Virginia to feel free to flood this tip line with whatever feelings you have and feel you need to express. I don't believe there's any law in Virginia that says you can't email in 10 times a day with your favorite passage from scripture that you think everyone should read or whatever it is, man. I hope if that is against the law, don't follow what I said.
But I mean, it sounded like the tip line's gone, though. It sounded like it was taken down back in September. So whatever email address or whatever phone number.
Oh, okay.
The structure of it. But no, that joint gone. Quietly.
Okay.
Quietly
gone. I got caught up and I missed that important detail. Yeah. So all the better. Props to
even more
to
poetic.
The people for bringing an end to this nonsense and ridiculousness, Manuel. Because it's there, as I understand it, these tip lines are still up in some of the other states we've covered.
Oh, I'm sure.
Hampshire, Florida, Texas, a few other places. So let's hope this is the first of many to fall.
Yeah, for sure. And importantly, to your point, that is a important, I think. Method of resisting these tip lines is to flood them with other stuff, especially legitimate abuses in the system. Like, this school has had a leaky faucet for so long and we're in a drought. Send someone to fix that. This school, send some legitimate concerns because, of course, if we truly care about the quality of our education system, if these tip lines are truly rooted in trying to do what's best for young people, there's a lot of things across the system to report, including decisions made by policymakers that are not in keeping with democratic humanizing classrooms. Report all that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Jeff. That about does it for this week's Do Now. We have giant classrooms and, I guess, defunct hotlines. Interesting set of stories there. And now we're about to transition to a very important discussion, examining the ongoing issues within the early childhood education space, within the kindergarten space, and fighting for equity and advancing equity for all young people, like really young people in this case. All right, that's coming up next in our seminar. Stay tuned.
Hey folks, thanks so much for tuning in to All the Above. We really appreciate you. And as you know, All the Above is a small operation. It's just me and just Manuel, that's it. We have no sponsorships, which means we are totally dependent on our amazing audience to help support the show. So here's what you can do. Go to our website, which is aotashow.com/support. That's aotashow.com/support. There you can find links to everything you can do to support the show. You find all the links to every platform that we're on where you can like, subscribe, follow. Make sure you share our show with your whole network. Also, you can donate there. We are on Venmo. We're on Cash App, and most importantly, you can find the link to our Anchor page where you can become a monthly patron. Even a small donation once a month will make a huge difference in helping us continue to produce the show. Lastly, you can find there the link to get your flyest, best, latest, all the above show merch. Okay, all you got to do is go to aotashow.com/support. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of the show. All right, folks, welcome to today's seminar. Thanks so much for joining us today. And we are thrilled and excited to have with us a guest who, as I said at the top of the episode, is going to help, I think, both Manuel and I explore a really important topic and set of conversations in the field of education that's probably a little bit outside of our comfort zone, both being folks with deep secondary experience. But we are just excited to have an amazing elementary educator, and not only an elementary educator, but a early elementary educator, a kindergarten teacher extraordinaire here with us today, Tayo Enna. Welcome, Tayo, to All the Above.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to this discussion.
Yes, absolutely. Well, folks, let me tell you a little bit more about our guest. Tayo Enna has been teaching kindergarten at STEAM at Stipe for the past 17 years. He grew up in Santa Cruz, California, and received his bachelor's in social science and master's in educational leadership from San Jose State University. Tayo is the co-founder of the Black Educators Coalition, committed to the recruitment and retention of educators of color. He created the How to Raise an Anti-Racist Family Parent Workshop, designed to have conversations centered around recognizing and demonstrating what it means to be anti-racist parents. He has also developed the Young Black Scholars Club, a district-wide after-school program focused on celebrating, empowering, and inspiring Black and biracial students in kindergarten through third grade. Tayo is the Oak Grove School District's 2021 Teacher of the Year and recipient of the 49ers Foundation Teacher of the Game. Welcome again, Tayo Enna, to All the Above, and I'm going to kick it over to Manuel for our first question.
Yeah, we got some kindergarten dopeness in the building today, and although all of that is super important, it's also important to point out that 2/3 of your screen right now are 49er faithful. Go Niners, go Niners. And also, I do want to point out, if you are watching the video, you can't tell from the video, but Mr. Enna is like 8 feet tall. So I can imagine how the little kids react when they meet you for the very first time. So Tayo, thank you so much for being here. And it's not necessarily the fault of the creators / co-hosts of All the Above, but kindergarten hasn't really been discussed. Early childhood education in general hasn't really been discussed much on our show. So we want to start by giving you a moment just to share with us a little bit about what the kindergarten space is looking like these days, what equity issues might exist at that level that folks outside of that space perhaps aren't very well aware of.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so let me try to paint a picture of kindergarten from a daily experience. It's, first of all, a beautiful space for learning. Kids come in with these curious minds, and they're open and they're eager and they're excited about just the smallest things in the daily classroom setting. And so one of the things I love is hearing, Mr. Enna, this is my best day ever. And you get that in all types of settings. If we're using watercolors, if we're using Play-Doh, if we're engineering and building designs, the kids who have been to Disneyland, Great America, Six Flags are telling me that they consider this moment right now their best day ever. And so just inspiring those curious minds and uplifting them and being part of that process of having them see learning from a joyful perspective. Also, I get a sense of what Beatlemania felt like, because when I open my door each day, kids are excited, they're hyped to just enter the classroom and be a part of our daily interactions. And so when that door opens, kids are jumping, they're celebrating, they're clapping, and it just is refreshing to the heart. And it just reminds you of the importance of what we do and what we can provide them with in the classroom. And with that said, I think it's essential for early educators all the way through high school is like, how can we nurture and feed that? There's a desire for kids to learn, and they're amazed by what they get to capture within the classroom setting. So what can we do not to extinguish that, but to nurture that? And, I've been teaching for 17 years. This is my 18th year. And so I've seen it all. I had a VHS cassette tape in my classroom, and now we're currently streaming. And with that, I've seen some of those concerns that happen with technology, because I think technology is a wonderful thing, but in doses. And so what I'm starting to see more is a bit of a disconnect, because a lot of kids have had a lot of screen time as well as adults, and there could be a disconnect between the value of conversation. Because I've many a times gone to parks. I have two daughters, one is 4, one is 6, and we've gone to parks, and I've seen kids with their parents, and they're just sort of swinging by themselves or going down the slide while their parents are on their phone. And so there's this real opportunity to re-engage and recommit to the value of conversation and the importance of being around one another and not using our screen too much. And also when we're talking about equity, there's this 1,000,000-word gap by the age of 5 that I'm very concerned about. And it ties into the whole piece of conversation, because I try to spend as much time, especially in the car, with my daughters, just talking to them and asking questions and inquiring about their day and responding to their questions. So we're having this constant dialogue, and they're hearing a lot of words from me and from them. And with that gap, by kindergarten creates a concern for me, because I've seen it where kids are disengaged as listeners. Like, I'm actually in kindergarten teaching them how to listen as a student, how to face one, how to lean in, how to look at. And we actually had a discussion just the other day of like how to model that, how to be that, and what it feels like when someone doesn't look like they're listening, and the joy of listening to us. And then another thing I see in kindergarten, which is a bit of concern, is that element of independency. And this is regarding simple tasks like putting on your jacket, taking off your shoe, putting on your shoe, following one-step directions. And I think the more kids have opportunities at home to be independent rather than dependent on parents doing things for them, they see really value in that. I mean, I have kids, and again, this is kindergarten, not high school, but there are kids when they open a milk carton for the first time after saying, you can do this, this is how you do it, this is the way to do it, they are excited, they're dancing, they're doing the floss, they're doing the hype, they're doing all types of things to express like, I did this on my own. And so I think there's a real value of just allowing kids to be independent. Obviously, they're 5, so they need support from an adult, but when we give them the opportunities to grow on their own, they see true value in that. And then also, I remember years ago, my wife and I would go to events, sporting events. She's from UCLA, and so, or graduated from UCLA. And so we would go to football games and basketball games, and I'd see all these little kids wearing Stanford University sweaters and UCLA sweaters. And by them wearing that, they're already being filled with this idea of this space is for you. And I think it's really important for families that they have that conversation that your kid can go to college. Now, some kids may or may not, but I want them to have the belief and the understanding and the desire that they too should be in that space and can be in that space. And then the last thing is class size reduction. And I'm seeing right now, because I have a relatively smaller class than I've had in the past, when we're talking about equity is trying to reduce that class size. Because I've had upwards to 28 kids, and to have 28 5-year-olds, it looks like an endless line that never ends. And then there's an increase in volume in the class, and there's a disconnect between our discussions because I can only call on so many students at a time. And so I think kids feel removed when they're in a space like that. So if we can really have a discussion from the state level down about class size reduction, not just in early childhood education, but throughout, I think that would greatly benefit the student, the teacher, and the environment.
Yeah. Tayo, I really appreciate those words. And I think the irony of us not responding effectively from a policy perspective around class size reduction in kindergarten is, I would say it's fair to say most adults in our society have had a very familiar type of experience that should give you all the insight you need to know about why that is so important, which is hosting birthday parties. And anyone who's ever tried to have a birthday party with like 9 or 10 4 and 5-year-olds and felt the exhaustion and the like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. With that size of a group that's honestly just trying to have fun together, right? Isn't necessarily trying to do super complex things like learn your shapes and sounds and colors and letters and write and read, should have no doubt about the value of reducing class size in kindergarten. So just wanted to share that. But Tayo, I think you speaking to the power and importance here of kindergarten, I think is so compelling. And also, it's interesting that California, like many states around the country, doesn't actually legally require kindergarten for students. And in fact, here in California, just recently, Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed a bill that would have mandated kindergarten for all students prior to entering the first grade, citing that it would cost the state somewhere around $268 million a year, and citing the fact that most kids already go to kindergarten anyways. So really would love to get your insights on the importance developmentally and educationally of kindergarten for young people. And also thinking about this policy for a minute, do you have any insights to share about consequences, unintended or otherwise, that a policy like mandating kindergarten might have?
Yes. So my initial thought when I heard about this veto by Gavin Newsom was, you got to be kidding me. Then I said, okay, let me read some articles and do some research. And I've come to the conclusion that you got to be kidding me. I just don't quite understand the idea of why there's opposition to this. I don't know if it's the word mandated, and we've come from, mandated mass to mandated kindergarten, but I think like, well, if first grade is the start of compulsory education, why can't kindergarten be? Because it would show a true commitment, investment in early childhood education. And so I think that's essential, because I've seen the consequences just in my classroom when kids miss significant time. Even if they miss, let's say, a span of 2 weeks in the classroom, or various days, they miss 2 days a week or so forth, they're behind the rest of the class because we're moving forward at a gradual pace. I don't want to make kindergarten sound like we're rapidly moving through things, but we're consistently moving forward. And when kids miss that opportunity, it's detrimental to them as a learner, because now they're behind the ball when they enter first grade. And there's a lot of things that happen beyond just the academics in kindergarten. Like, we're talking about how to be empathetic and how to understand other people's emotions and how to understand our own emotions and how to work through that. I mean, just the other day, we were talking about the difference between being alone and being lonely. And after that discussion, one of my students was literally looking around the playground, trying to find kids that look lonely, to go over to them and say, hey, would you like to play with me? And that's the value of having a classroom, to have a discussion about things they might not think about. I don't think prior to that he was walking around saying, you know what, what's the difference between alone and lonely? But then when we had a classroom discussion, there was a lot of power to that. And then we're also talking in kindergarten about identity and one learning about who they are and who they're becoming. And there's real power to that. And the understanding of diversity of thought, because one could say, well, I'm having those discussions at home with my child. But there's this true value of hearing from others and hearing the experiences of their peers that they can relate to or see differences in, but understand we're here together. And then there's a lot of developmental skills that we're talking about with collaboration, learning from mistakes, learning from our peers, knowing that there's challenges ahead of us that we can take on, because we're a STEAM school. So we talk a lot about being problem solvers. And so because of our constant discussions while they're in my classroom in kindergarten, they're looking at themselves as problem solvers, whether it's something within their table and a discussion that they're having there, or the greater good of the school, or things that they can do at home. So there's this importance of making sure kids have those opportunities to be in a classroom setting that's not just about learning sounds and learning how to add and subtract, but how to interact and socialize with one another to improve their opportunities and to just connect with one another. I mean, we talked about, during, being distant from each other during COVID, and now that we have an opportunity to be together, let's take on that opportunity and experience.
Yeah. I also thought, you got to be kidding me when I saw that. And I don't even know anything or much about kindergarten. Certainly, I don't know nearly as much as you, but it just seems so. I'll be honest, I didn't realize that kindergarten already was optional. I don't have kids of my own, so I didn't realize that kindergarten was like not mandated. So seeing that, I was like, oh, wow. But although mandated kindergarten doesn't appear to be coming to California, at least this year. Last year, the state did take some steps to expand access to preschool and really invest in this idea of universal preschool. But part of that was also investment in transitional kindergarten, also known as TK. So we're wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about the meaning and purpose of transitional kindergarten and what the expansion of transitional kindergarten might do to impact the overall quality of our early childhood education system.
Yes. Yeah. Transitional kindergarten helped fill the void and a gap for learners. Because there was a time when you could enter kindergarten as long as you turned 5 by December 1st. And then that scaled back to September 1st. And so there's a percentage of students that weren't having an opportunity to get a free education in the public school setting. And so this is helping fill that void. And again, it ties back into for the youth, for these 4-year-olds, they're getting a chance to interact with one another in a social setting. They're getting opportunities to role play and try things out, because you got to learn what works and what doesn't work when you're interacting with your peers and your friends. And then moving forward, I think it's great to hear that TK educators, next year and beyond, that are inspiring to become educators in that space, are going to be required to have 24 units of early childhood education. Because I think it's key to have access and an awareness of what to expect, because this is a whole different playing field. And that was one of my concerns, that, and this is nothing against upper grade teachers or teachers that have not been in the space, but it's completely different than what they've experienced in 5th grade or 4th grade or even 2nd grade. So to have an opportunity to be in that space, to learn from that space, to learn from others who are experienced in that space, I think is essential moving forward. So I think as we move through the years with transitional kindergarten, it's very important that all stakeholders meet, from TK teachers collaborating with kindergarten teachers to early childhood educators, so that we can make sure that we're creating a space designed for learning and not making TK, because this is one of my big concerns, not making TK just a watered down version of kindergarten and making it a rigorous setting where kids are getting penalized for not mastering standards. Because that should be a space where they're having a lot of opportunity to play and work on work on hands-on activities opposed to worksheets, that they're developing those fine motor skills, because I see that's one of the things we focus on early on in kindergarten is fine motor skills. And if they can have that early on, then we can transition to other things during the school year. And from a personal perspective, I'm getting an opportunity with our TK students to interact with them on a daily basis because they share our kindergarten playground. So I get to say hi to these students. I get to know one another. There's one in particular that likes to show me magic tricks, how a rock can disappear or reappear in his hand. And we're establishing a connection that will play out next year when he or she is in my classroom. And instead of those tears and fears of the first day of kindergarten, they'll be eager and excited because now they get a chance to be in Mr. Enna's class, who they know and who they're comfortable with. And also, it's giving me an opportunity to get to learn the different dynamics of each child so that I can start brainstorming how to make that transition for them positive and how to work with them through some of the things I'm noticing right now in the playground to help their experience throughout kindergarten.
Yeah, I so much of what you were saying there, Tayo, resonates with me, and you're honestly making me think about. I said this earlier in the episode. The most intimidating experience I think I've had as an educator came a few years ago during the strike here in LA, where I was helping to cover classes, and I had to cover a kindergarten class, and here I am. Big bad secondary educator, thinking I've seen it all, and was like, oh my goodness, the complexity of things that are happening in a kindergarten classroom is on a whole different level from what you experience at the secondary level where kids come with the skills, at least mostly come with the skills to like manage so much of themselves on their own. And in kindergarten, you have both, as you said, the sort of focus on fine motor skills and the real like concentration of learning that is about the development of the young people as young people. And then also, just as demanding set of, academic content standards and those sort of things as well. So just wanted to share that and give you and all of our kindergarten educators out there some big props for the complexity of the work. And I think that is often dismissed when people think about kindergarten as just, supervising the youngest kids or maybe don't see the nuanced nature of the work as you've explained here. So just wanted to share that. But in addition to your work in the classroom, you also have taken on some leadership roles outside the classroom, including in the area of helping to recruit and retain a diverse educated workforce and bring teachers of color into the profession. And so I wonder if you can share with us a little bit about what that work is like, in particular in the early childhood education space, and how, if at all, that work differs from the just sort of general work K-12 around educator workforce diversity.
Yeah, I guess we're going to address the unicorn in the room, because I've been called a unicorn and an anomaly. Not just because I'm a male educator in early childhood education, but also a Black male educator in early childhood education. So, I think when we're talking about diversifying, it starts early, and there's not enough examples of myself across the state. And I just want to be supportive of that, because I'm actually trying, in addition to the Black Educators Coalition, which I co-founded with Dr. Jamal Splain and Jimmy Brown, I'm trying to develop sort of like a BIPOC early childhood educator network, especially for males, because there's unique experiences that we have in early childhood education that I think go unnoticed by others. And one of those is biases. I've can't count the number of times where I've seen unflattering looks from parents when they see me for the first time. And I don't think it's just my height. Yes, I am 6'5.5", but I've seen parents almost stop in their tracks as they see me as the teacher that is going to be for their student. Now that all changes once they get to see the relationship I've developed with the kid and the way I run my classroom and the joy that I bring to their child. But those initial reactions and initial looks, now they have decreased. I don't see them as frequently as I did 17, 16, 15 years ago. But they're still present. And they're also present for the teachers that I've spoken to about some relatable experiences that we have. And then there's also some unfortunate interactions I've had with Ed Karens, where they have a particular belief on what a classroom teacher should look like and sound like and be like. And I've been sort of challenged one time in the past. She will remain nameless. We'll just call her Ed Karen. And she talked about basically my lack of having motherly instincts, which I made sure to address right in that very moment. I was not going to allow her to fill my space with that negativity. And so I think we have to really understand that we have to create a sense of belonging for teachers like me, and not look at these so-called deficits that they're labeling as lack of qualities, but encourage them to be in that space. So I would also ask for credential programs to give real opportunity for teachers of color, but also male teachers of color, an opportunity to be in this space. Because I'm quite certain if you're in this space, you'll see the true value and the opportunity that you can provide. And I would also suggest that you just be yourself. Don't try to conform in any way or say, well, my experience was different. This is your experience to design for you and for those students. And if you want them to bring themselves into this classroom and the whole student, bring yourself into that classroom as well. And I think of Sharif El-Mekki, and he has a shirt that I love. And the saying is, be the teacher you never had. And so that's one reason I wanted to be an educator in early childhood development, is because I never had a kindergarten teacher that looked like me. The first time I saw a Black man in front of a classroom was my junior year in high school. And so I wanted to make sure that I could give that early experience and exposure to the students so that maybe they can also see themselves, right? Because they're downloading information every single day. And if they see me in this space and I look like them, then they can also see themselves in this space down the road. So it might take some time because they're only 5 and they might not get into the profession till they're 25, but they're downputting that information that, hey, I too can be in front of the classroom and not just in a classroom. And like we talked about earlier, it's the power of representation. It's just so important for kids to see themselves and understand that this is a place for them.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I can't help but think about the power of, so for those parents who do have the creeps, as you called it, when they see you, just the power of their child seeing you and having that experience early on, because so much of the discussion around educator diversity really highlights the importance of young people having exposure to educators from all walks of life, and again, just beautiful knowing that you are in that early space and giving that opportunity to young people early on to have a Black teacher. Because I didn't have one till college. So shout out to you for sure. Now,
and I think it's also important because as I see kids in my space, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I see kids in my space, I tell them, you could be a teacher, because there's been this research that shows that a white female teacher is told as early as 3rd grade that they can be a teacher, right? They start hearing that discussion amongst others. But for a Black man, they might not hear it until college, which isn't too late, but there's a big gap. And so I make a point to tell my students, hey, you just taught me something. I think you would be a wonderful teacher. Now they blow me off. Oh, Mr. Enna, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I'm not going to be a teacher, but I'm planting that seed of belief that, hey, Mr. Enna believes in me. And so maybe, just maybe. And so I always want to make sure that I emphasize that to my students, because right now we're talking about community helpers in my class. That's one of our themes. and we're talking about firefighters, and we're talking about muralists, and we're talking about chefs and so forth. But they're right now interning in my classroom. A student is in this space each and every day, from kindergarten or TK all the way through high school. They're getting a classroom experience. They're getting training on the spot. And so it's important for us to say, hey, you two belong here.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And as busy as you are, you made the decision that you're not busy enough because you started something, some parent workshops about how to raise an anti-racist family. So we want to talk about that for a bit. So as a parent yourself, and as somebody who undoubtedly works with or communicates with parents a lot, these workshops about anti-racism and helping parents understand the key elements of anti-racism. Talk to us a bit about those, and what would you say are some of the key elements of anti-racism for parents, and particularly for parents of really young children, of 4, 5, 6-year-olds?
Absolutely. So I like to connect things to basketball. I played basketball my whole career, through high school and college. And so I look at this as you got to develop your inside and outside game. My inside game is my classroom, and then this is an aspect of my outside game, my jump shot. And so I designed how to raise an anti-racist family while we're distant learning, because I felt like this was a window for parents to sort of see the classroom, like they were sitting, because especially in kindergarten, they were sitting side by side, their child, and listening to the books and hearing the conversations. And I wanted them to understand my why, that there's a purpose for the books that I'm reading, that I'm sharing with these kids and having these conversations about empathy and valuing oneself. And so I designed this to provide a space to have those conversations, especially since we're talking about ethnic studies. And I felt like I could get into that environment and say, this is why it's important. This is why we do it, and how you can model it at home. And so one of the main components of just how to raise an anti-racist family is the willingness to lean in. Because like Ibram X. Kendi talks about, it's not enough to just say, I'm not racist, because you're idle in that position. You need to lean in and be proactive. And so what I usually talk about, in those initial stages with the parents is this idea of planting the seed. Because there have been many a times when I've talked to my daughters, especially my oldest, who's 6 now, about social injustices from her perspective, right? I have to make sure I have it for her space and her age. But right after I think I make this profound statement that I think just like I hit it out of the ballpark and it's still going, she'll look at me and just say, so are we going to get ice cream? I'm like, oh man, this did not land. And that's my first feeling. That, oh man, I missed the mark. I got to change this up. But in reality, I planted a seed. And I look at it as a garden. Like we plant seeds, and there's not instantly like a tomato plant growing. Something's happening. Something's working beneath the ground and beneath the soil. And it's my responsibility to nurture it and water it and provide it sunlight. So in these small conversations that I have with my daughter and that I discuss with the parent workshop is that we just have to make sure we're watering it. We can't allow these opportunities not to take place, because then nothing will grow. And growing is occurring. And what I've noticed, especially with my daughter, is now she's inquiring, asking more questions, and we're having longer discussions and more valuable discussions. And some might say, oh, well, kids are too young to understand racism and social injustice. But I remember seeing a saying that said, if Black kids are young enough to experience racism, then white kids are young enough to learn about it. And so I always talk to my families, because it ranges. Kids from 3 years of age all the way maybe to high school, or some of these parents have. And just the importance of having those conversations, and that you'll fail forward, that you have to try these things out. You have to try these conversations, because in reality, your kids probably know well more than you anticipated. And also, what Ibram X. Kendi talks about is, if we're not having these discussions with our children, then they're being fed a lot of racist ideas because it's institutionalized, it's systematic. So it's everywhere, whether it's in toys, it's in movies, it's in video games. There's either a removal of somebody or a stereotype that's being presented. So we have to make sure that we are doing our right part in providing opportunities to bring TV shows that are diverse. I mean, Sesame Street has been consistent with that. And maybe Sesame Street isn't right for a sixth grader, but if you have a 3-year-old, you have a 2-year-old, you need to get them in that space because they're addressing these things for those kids. And then just make sure you're diversifying your books that you have at home. And also, I want the parents to talk to their kids about, look, I'm having these conversations with others, and this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to grow and be an anti-racist. So if the parents are explaining to their kids, this is a space that I'm trying to grow in, then it provides the child with an understanding of, okay, this is something really important. My parents are invested. I need to invest, and we too can make the world a better place. And I also, push back on the idea of like, these are courageous conversations, because I do agree with Glenn Singleton and so forth. But what I'm saying is, if we do this enough and we start early with our children, then they won't look at it as courageous conversations. They'll just look at it as common conversations, that these are things that we can have naturally, not forced or challenged, but that this is a space that we can have and discuss important issues and activate that. And then the last point is not to be a bystander, because oftentimes we might hear something at school or in passing or at home, and we're like, oh, I shouldn't address that, or maybe I shouldn't. And I really encourage parents to develop the upstander within them. And what's really beautiful to see is, in my last discussion with one of the families, a parent actually said that she did that. And she felt very validated in that moment, that she had a little interaction at work and decided to be an upstander. And she was able to persuade and explain something that somebody else had missed. And I think there's real value in honoring, like, hey, you did the work that we've been talking about, and you should be ecstatic about, moving forward. So, and the last part, I'm sorry, is just this empathy. This keys to empathy. We have to just learn from one another, share our experiences, honor and value our differences, but see where we intersect and where we can connect. It is so essential.
Yeah. Tayo, love what you had to say there. Thank you for just taking on this incredibly important work. And I will say, if it's any consolation to you, Tayo, that when they get to high school, they will probably also ask if we're still getting ice cream too. So even though the seeds, as you said, are planting and germinating, you might still get that question when they're 16 or 17 as well. But folks, unfortunately, that is it for today's seminar. I want to give a big thanks to our guest, award-winning kindergarten teacher, Tayo Enna, from up in Oak Grove School District in the San Jose, California area. Tayo, thanks so much for joining us today on All the Above.
Thank you for having me, guys. Take care.
All right. Folks, thanks for joining us for today's seminar. But stick around. Next up is our Class Dismissed.
All right, folks, it's time for Class Dismissed. Let's end this episode on a positive note, shouting out some folks doing wonderful things in the world of education. Jeff, what do we got for today's Class Dismissed?
Well, Manuel, today we got to give a shout out to lots of educators, frankly, but also a slice of folks in the system, especially here in LA, but this is true in many places around the country as well. Folks working on the very most fundamental aspect of school, which is getting the kids to come. Focusing on attendance. And we know that over the last few years, since the pandemic just devastated us and forced the closure of physical school campuses, we have not yet been able to fully return to the kind of pre-pandemic levels of attendance. And here in LA, The LA Unified School District has been doing a lot to reconnect kids and families with school and with the school system. And on Friday, November 4th, there was a big I Attend School campaign day with folks from the central office, with pupil services counselors going out into the community to do home visits and really try to connect, to go to homes and find students and families who have been especially chronically absent from school, to try to figure out what their needs are and help bring them back into their school and the school community. So just want to give a shout out to all the educators working hard on attendance. And we know that, a lot of those lingering effects of the pandemic with illness and loss in families and those kind of things are still hitting a certain slice of our community very hard. And, it's just great to see a school system and a sort of army of educators engaging deeply on this issue and really saying, you know what, we're gonna come to you and figure out what we can do to help support you and bring you back to school campuses. And on a quick point of data, the chronic absenteeism data for the district, that's students who are attending school less than 92% of the time. That data has improved significantly this year, Manuel, down, I believe, 6 percentage points from the year prior. So we're seeing movement in the right direction, still a ways to go, but just want to say, props to the district for working on this. And I know there's many other districts out there doing similar things to help reconnect kids to school.
Yeah, for sure. And that is not easy work. So shout out to everybody, not just within Los Angeles Unified, but in other districts as well across the nation that are dedicating themselves and working hard to help reconnect students with their schools, with their campuses. So for sure, shout out to all of them. And also, the classroom teacher in me would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to shout out everybody working out there in the school system generally, but specifically classroom teachers and site administrators and all the staff at different campuses across the nation. It's November. Thanksgiving break is coming up and then winter break after that. And this time of the semester can be very tough. The weather's changed and it gets dark so early now. And it's hard work. It's just really hard work working in our school system. So shout out to all of y'all who have been doing your best since the start of school all the way till now. Hang in there. Definitely hang in there. You have a break coming up. Hopefully that'll give you some time to get some sort of rest and some sort of recovery, because this is difficult work. So keep hanging in there. I mean that. It's very much appreciated. All of y'all who are out there, despite all the challenges in the system and despite all the challenges we face, all of y'all who are continuing to show up every day for our young people. So shout out to all of y'all. And also shout out to all of y'all who are watching or listening to this episode, especially y'all who are still playing the episode all the way in, like, what are we, an hour in or something like that. Shout out to y'all for hanging in there with us all the way to the end of the episode. You might as well take an extra moment or two to make sure you've done that 5 stars, or to make sure you've clicked on the link to the YouTube video so you can give that thumbs up, or vice versa. So I mean, you might as well. You hung in with us this far, so very much appreciate y'all, AOTA family. Remember, AOTA.com for all the previous episodes and all that good stuff. We very much love and appreciate you, and we'll catch you next time.